Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the 12th album from R. Kelly, titled Black Panties. Now here's a part of my musical philosophy that ends up being more complicated than it sounds. When it comes to music, I need to be able to buy into the romance projected by the artist. I can look past a lot of corny lines and ridiculous lyrics if I could buy into the persona of the performer. And when that persona breaks down, it's incredibly difficult to repair. It's one of the reasons why I, like so many critics for example, find it very hard to buy into any of the modern romantic sentiments of someone like, say, Chris Brown. And I can imagine that many fans of modern R&B legend R. Kelly probably felt the same way around the mid-2000s. Now, sure, his first three albums, they're untouchable, they're awesome. But in the early 2000s, I don't know, something went wrong. Maybe it was the criminal allegations, maybe it was the substandard material, or maybe it was just because something got knocked loose in R. Kelly's brain. But suddenly it got a lot harder to buy into any of the romance that R. Kelly was proposing, especially considering the sexually explicit nature of his lyrics. And yet, things did change for the better in late 2010 when R. Kelly released his album Love Letter. It was a richly orchestrated homage to early soul and R&B with enough of a modern touch not to feel like a throwback. And it was excellent, mostly because it traded explicit sexuality for sensuality and love and proved to be a great fit for R. Kelly's jaw-droppingly powerful vocals. He then followed up in 2012 with Write Me Back, which moved forward in time to reference the disco era of the mid to late 70s. But unfortunately, it also lost a rather significant amount of unique flavor in the transition. The album might have been good, but look, it wasn't great. But it was rather worrying when R. Kelly announced a return to his modern R&B roots with his newest album, Black Panties, mostly because the worst songs on Write Me Back were those that went in a modern direction with an overload of auto-tune and overly electronic beats. And while there isn't anything wrong with going back to your roots, R. Kelly has trod that ground so many times that I honestly didn't think that there's anything new or interesting that he'd be able to bring to the table. Was I wrong with Black Panties? Well, unfortunately not entirely. Now look, don't get me wrong, R. Kelly's Black Panties is far from his worst album, but it's not his best by a long shot. Sure, it might be decent, but it's not the kind of record that gets me excited about R. Kelly, and it's not the one that's gonna stick in the memory in a month or two or even a week, which is disappointing to say the least. So, okay. Let's start with R. Kelly himself, and honestly, he's always been at his best part at every single album that he's been on. Confident, sensual, genuinely invested in his material with boatloads of charisma that have prolonged his career over so many of his imitators. R. Kelly steps onto this record with the personality and flair that most people have come to love, and he carries some songs simply on that alone. And unlike on Write Me Back, his voice is finally strengthened enough to hit those blissfully beautiful high notes and falsetto again, and it sounds wonderful. You can definitely tell that R. Kelly is invested in making this record really work and sound good, at least as much as he can control. And it's a shame that his producers let him down here. The trap-inspired beats and instrumentation and smoothly minimalist R&B jams sound hopelessly generic, and in comparison with the soul and disco touches of his previous two albums, I can't help but feel that the lack of melodies really don't help in his presentation, because no memorable hooks materialize to give this album's instrumentation some real personality and flair. A bigger problem is the tone of this record. While there's always been something of a slinky, understated darkness to R. Kelly's instrumentation, here it's too harsh and imposing, and it doesn't fit with the romantic tone that he's trying to go for. And that pitch-shifted deep voice repeating words continuously over some of the choruses, it doesn't help matters at all. Finally, I'll repeat something that I said when I reviewed Write Me Back. Auto-tune is not necessary for R. Kelly, even in his lower register. The man's voice has incredible texture and range, and he's working his ass off to sound intimate and romantic. So production that only serves to distance him from his audience does not fit well on this album. Fortunately, the guest stars do a decent bit to pick up the slack, with the highlight actually being Kelly Rowland on All the Way. The song has a playful sensuality, and the two performers, they really work off each other incredibly well. And then Jeezy continues to work really hard on his verse on Spend That, which is basically a generic club jam. But the big surprise for me came from 2 Chainz of all people on My Story, mostly because his punchlines land blend effectively and they sound pretty good. However, Ludacris's appearance on Leg Shakin' is not great at all. Now don't get me wrong, I like Ludacris, but his punchlines are just way too silly for a sex song, especially one that's opening the album. And here's where we're going to have to talk about lyrics and themes. Now, I'll give R. Kelly this. He's always been an R&B songwriter that I've really liked because he's witty, he's got a gift for interesting punchlines, and his lyrics have always flowed together extremely well. Furthermore, the one big strength of R. Kelly is that he's always been a fantastic storyteller, injecting his songs with a lot of texture and hidden nuance behind the imaginative worlds that he creates. Take a song like Taxi Cab from Love Letter. It's a song about hooking up in a cab, but it inverts the gender divide in One Night Stands and plays the emotion damn near perfectly. Or let's take Same Girl, his hilarious duet with Usher from the mid-2000s that talk about two men falling in love with the same woman, and it just plays that balance between humor and sensuality incredibly well. And with that, Black Panties just doesn't seem to have that sort of grand ambition. In terms of songwriting, it sounds like something R. Kelly could have written 20 years ago. And look, while I understand the callback to his earlier work, he has grown as an artist since then, and this album doesn't go above and beyond in the songwriting department to distinguish it from those earlier works. So, okay, there's nothing really wrong with that though. Black Panties is just another collection of sex songs. I can go with that. And I'll admit that there are moments where R. Kelly's creative wordplay does mesh well with his delivery. But on other tracks, this album makes the mistake of sounding sexual without being sexy. Like on, let's say, Cookies, which drives the baked good as a symbol for vaginas to the absolute extreme. Or let's take the song Marry the Pussy, which has a prelude, which is actually unfortunately more interesting than the song itself, which also appears to frame the woman in the scenario as only just the one part of her anatomy. Classy. But here's the thing, it's not just the sex songs that call back to his earlier work. Songs like My Story and Right Back feel like songs that aspiring rappers drop on their debut EPs instead of from an R&B titan in his mid-40s. And these songs, they just feel jarring on this album. And then there's the final song, Shut Up, which calls out all of R. Kelly's haters and detractors who questioned its relevance and career. It's a song it's good, it's got some good wordplay, and I liked parts of it, but it's 2 albums too late. Kels, look, I'm gonna be blunt, you did fall off in the mid to late 2000s, and then you came back with 2 successful and interesting albums that I actually enjoyed. And you had a good 2013, so where's this song coming from? Besides, considering your legacy, you should be past the point of calling out your haters. You don't need to do it. Just keep making good music and they'll end up falling silent along the way. So look, in the end, Black Panties, it's decent, but it's not great, mostly because it calls back to a point in R. Kelly's career that didn't need to be revisited. It's not like anybody forgot it. And while there have been a couple decent sex jams on this record, there's a lot of poor production, some ridiculous lyrics, a strange lack of memorable hooks, and a near complete abandonment of the crazy awesome storytelling that has distinguished R. Kelly's work in the past. It sucks away a lot of this record's personality, ends up becoming more bland than anything else. So with that in mind, I'm giving this album a 6 out of 10. And if you're a hardcore R. Kelly fan, you'll probably enjoy it, but look, he's done better. And to be honest, I'm a lot more excited about the new episodes of Trapped in the Closet coming out in 2014, because those sound amazing. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. If there's anything I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or if there's any other albums you'd like me to take a look at before the end of the year, I'd be more than happy to take a listen if I can. So until then, see you next time.